So it says here, off your website, you began as a T-boy at Westside Studios. So what was this straight out of school, or did you?
No, what it was, I think I was about 21.
Oh, right.
So I was in a band, like most people who seem to get into this kind of world.
Yeah.
And we had a sort of Yamaha 8-track tape machine. Which I shelled out for, but I had no idea how to use. Was this on
a quarter-inch reel thing? Or was
no, it was like cassette, but 8-track cassette. I mean, very sort of home user type thing. But I didn't have the first clue how to use it, because the other guy in the band was the sort of technical one. And then, of course, as bands do, it broke up. So I was left with this machine, and I was still writing songs, and I wanted to learn, you know, how to actually record it. Yeah, bit of everything, really. Bit of everything, not very well.
Were you sort of self-taught, or was this
Yeah, just kind of
training, or
no, just kind of figured, you know, G, D, C. You know, what more do you
musical
need?
family? Did you have?
My dad was in a band. Actually, he's in that picture over there. He was in a band in Brazil.
Jet Blacks.
Called the Jet Blacks.
In Brazil.
Yeah.
Right, I see.
And so I think I got it from him. He used to play the guitar to me a lot.
But you grew up in London, or?
Yes, grew up in London.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I was left with this machine, and of course I didn't have the first clue how to use it. So I thought, well, I better figure it out. And then I kind of made the leap in my mind, like, well, if I get a job in a recording studio, I'll get to hang around with lots of bands, and I'll learn how to record, and it'll be great fun. And I got really lucky, I guess. I mean, running a studio now and knowing how many CVs we get and how many applications we get, I was really lucky to get in there. And it was, Westside Studios, as you say.
Did you know about the jobs through a personal thing?
No, I think I just did the Yellow Pages or whatever it was.
To get in touch with them.
I just did all of them, and that was the one that kind of got back to me.
Right.
So turned up for that, and it was really in the sort of days of, you know, it was T-boy and night reception and all of that. So it was quite a kind of journey to get through. And I think my first job was unblocking a urinal. Yeah. I think that was the first job I did.
We're talking about urinals all day.
I know, it's going to be a theme. It's going to be a theme. So that was my very first thing, and then I think I was on Pots and Pans up in the kitchen. They had kind of in-house cuisine. Yeah. So I did that for a while, but it was.
So you were a trained chef.
Trained washer-up. Yeah. But it was really just the most amazing kind of introduction I could have dreamed of, because it was. Did you ever go to Westside?
I did, but only when it was looking a bit tatty.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I was there sort of 2000 when it was still Clive Langer and Alan Winstanley. Yeah. And it was just incredible. I mean, when I started, Nick Cave was in one room, and Catatonia were in the other room.
Fantastic.
And it was just extraordinary. I mean, it was all these incredible producers and engineers just constantly coming through, you know, Phil Brown, Tony Platt, Hugh Padgham, Al Clay, Chris Sheldon, all these sorts of people. Yeah. So.
Who have all become customers of yours?
Yes, yeah. Well, I stole the Rolodex, you see, you know, when I left. But, yeah, so obviously it took a while to actually be allowed in the room. Yeah. You know, there was quite a few months of pots and pans and unblocking toilets. And then I was allowed to sort of quietly sit at the back. And then I think I graduated to be able to sort of do the radar. They were big on radar at Westside, so I, you know, play and record and stop on that, and then slowly but surely sort of got to do more and more assisting. But yeah, really.
So how were the sessions with Langer and Winstanley? Who was engineering? Who was doing what? What was Langer doing? What was Winstanley doing?
Oh well, that's a very set formula. Alan Winstanley does all the engineering, technical stuff, and Clive Langer just completely stays out of that world, and he's more the sort of creative, the arrangements and the atmosphere and the vibe of the sessions, that kind of thing. Although Alan Winstanley can probably do that as well, but I mean they were quite kind of clearly defined in their roles.
And would Alan delegate things to you to do then? Did you sort of get a good?
Well, he was great because he was a great believer in the T-boy or the assistant or whatever I was at that point shouldn't just sit at the back scratching his balls, as the expression was that he actually used to use. So he would always try and get you involved, as I say, in like running the multi-track or that kind of thing. Yeah. Which is great, 'cause it's terrifying. I mean, the first time you have to do that, and as I say, I think...
At least there's an undo on a radar, though.
Yes, exactly, yeah, no, thank God it wasn't 2-inch. But I think it was, I think Catatonia was the first time I got to press buttons, and terrifying. But I think his thinking, it quite rightly, was there's nothing quite like the deep end to kind of throw you in and sort of get you involved. So
he was quite encouraging to sort of
oh yeah,
show you things.
Yeah. He was a legend. Really nice.
Mm.
And Phil Brown was also very, very kind to me as well.
Yeah, well, he's a legend too.
Yeah,
isn't he?
yeah.
Really, he's amazing. Yeah.
Real dude. I must read his book actually.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, it's good, is it?
It's hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
It's really good. Yeah.
He's real good. He loves sort of telling stories.
Yeah.
Doesn't he? So.
Yeah. Yeah. He goes into all the
really
details about microphone models and exactly which drugs were being taken.
Nice.
Really.
Yeah, two very key factors in any session. Yeah.
So, what did you learn from Phil Brown then?
I think probably just very much the kind of from memory, because it's been a while obviously, but I seem to remember he was quite sort of minimal with his miking and stuff, and he just had microphones that he knew how to use and he knew where to put them, and it wasn't 16, 18 mics on a drum kit. It was, I seem to remember he had a kind of Sony mic that he used in mono over the top, and he just knew how to get amazing sounds very simply. That was my kind of enduring memory of him. He just sort of always sort of made it look so easy, which I guess is a sort of true marker of being good at something, making it look easy.
So how long were you at Westside?
I was there actually on and off for about 3 or 4 years. I went, I decided to do one of these engineering courses. I did the Gateway course, and that kind of went hand in hand with my interning and assisting at Westside, so I sort of swapped between the two.
Oh, right.
And they were quite nice, they were quite sort of flexible, and there was a sort of changeover point when Sanctuary Records were buying all the studios in London, and they took over Westside, and I was back there in that period as well. But I was sort of flitting between the two. So yeah, about 3 or 4 years.
Right, so you managed to squeeze in the Gateway course and then...
And then I'd leave there and then come back come back to the studio and do night reception for the night and do my homework and all that kind of thing. So yeah, it was a great training. I mean, and actually the chap that I started this business with, I met at the Gateway course, so that was very serendipitous.
I was going to say, what happened next?
Well, I think I always had it in mind. I just had this kind of dream of always running my own studio, and I think
a lot of people do, so
but
how
they
did you
don't
make it happen?
Well, there was a lot of sort of, is this the right thing to do? I always had it in the back of my mind when I was at Westside, and I was always I was a bit of a spy in a way, because I was constantly trying to sort of pick up on whether what I had in mind was the right idea, and whether it would work, and whether there was a place for it. And the idea I really had was kind of something in the middle, but that's fully equipped, beautifully wired together, that is the kind of minimum of what you'd need, but nicely put together at a kind of affordable price, if that makes sense. Which I hope I've done.
So presumably, meanwhile, while it was all being built, you were looking into how to get customers and clients.
Yes. Well, as this goes back to my earlier joke about stealing the Rolodex from the old studio I'd worked at, which isn't quite true, but I'd made connections with people, and I knew a few people, and actually Tony Platt, who was a frequent visitor at Westside Studios, he was very kind, and I called him within the first week and sort of told him what I was doing, and it just so happened that he needed to do a transfer from a radar to a Pro Tools session, and we actually had a radar, and there weren't many studios that did, so I got him through the door, and then he was great. I mean, he was one of our main clients for the first few years, and he's kind of got a very well respected opinion. So he told people about us, and it's like anything really. It's word of mouth. It's a lot of money for people to come into a studio, and they need to know that it works.
And did you have a sort of a plan of how you were going to get clients to take to your investors, to sort of show them what you were going to do to bring clients in? Presumably you had to have some sort
I told them I had to do a full business plan and all this kind of thing, and
I wouldn't know where to begin with something like that.
That was slightly tricky, because obviously they wanted to know, well, what have you got set up and what have you got ready, kind of thing. So I think just through my sort of contacts that I'd made at Westside, and also I was at Townhouse for a while. I was able to say to them, well, I know these people, and these people have expressed an interest, and I've been talking to people about the studio, and these people have said that they'll come in. But of course you don't know until you open, do you? It's not like I had signed forms.
No, because studios were sort of closing around your ears, weren't they, while this was going on, presumably?
Yeah, but I mean that was the great gamble, and it was all about price point and what you offer.
I suppose most of the ones closing are sort of on a slightly more expensive and grander scale, aren't they? The townhouses and the Olympics and things.
I think so. I think it's just when you've got that many. You know, there was an old school way of running a studio, which was fantastic. You know, where you had in-house maintenance, you had assistants on the books. I mean, I don't know how many studios these days actually have full-time assistants. I think a lot of people use freelance.
What do you do then? How does it work?
I've got a full-time assistant. Al, who you met earlier. But he's also an engineer in his own right. So you know, he can handle that side of things as well if I'm not here. So yeah, we keep our stuff pretty minimal. And that just seems to work with the size of space.
Yeah. So, so how soon after you opened did you start engineering sessions? Would people drag you in to do that? Or,
yeah, kind of.
Tony Platt presumably does it all himself, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for a while I was just sort of assisting, which I think probably for people was quite bizarre to have the studio owner doing their assisting. But I'm very kind of. I'm obviously very proud of this place and very kind of hands-on. So it was very important to me to know that everything was working and running, and so it didn't bother me really to do that to begin with, because I'd far rather, you know, that everything went according to plan and people were happy.
Well, also it's a great opportunity to learn as well, isn't it?
Well, yeah, exactly.
I'd love to go and make tea for people like Tony Platt again.
That's the amazing thing about
Tony Platt.
Tony, if you're listening, give him a call. He's ready.
He's got some good jokes.
Yes.
You know, he's got some stories, hasn't he, Tony?
Absolutely, absolutely. But I mean, I never, even now, I mean, I don't really sort of do the assisting anymore, but even now, it's the amazing thing about having our own studio and having a throughput of different people is you never stop learning. I mean, the way I record is just a Frankenstein of, as I'm sure it is with anyone really, of all the different people you've learned from.
Well, that's why I do these interviews. I steal all people like yours' ideas.
Ah, right, okay. I'm sure it's nothing you haven't heard.
I'm hoping to hear some new stuff.
Yeah.
Tell us some new stuff.
I'll do my best. Is that a question or?
Yeah, go on. Tell us some stuff.
Golly, what do I do?
What good secrets have you got?
What do I do now? How do I pretend that these are mine and not someone else's? I think recently I've got quite into this thing about the sort of philosophy of room mics and ambience. I think that's kind of the key to certainly the kind of records that I like to listen to, that I like to make. Is the more and more you do this as the years go on, you realise if you put a microphone right next to something and it sounds good and you've got the right mic and the right EQ, you can get that sound sounding great. You do everything like that and you put it all together, and then like modern records are today and everything's so compressed, it's all kind of like that, isn't it? So the secret, I think, is not the mic that's there, it's the mic that's there, which I find is much more of a challenge to get right in a way. And if you get that right, that's kind of a really good sort of starting point to build on.
And what's the trick to getting that right? Is it?
Well, I think it's kind of knowing. Yeah, obviously it's sort of things like phase and you know, the type of mic you use and where you put it, and obviously the sound that's coming out of the instrument, and knowing.
And do you record those to two separate tracks, or?
No, more often I like to kind of put them down together. But particularly with drums, I always kind of, in the old days, it was, I think, kick, snare, pit, pop, pop. You know, it's all of that. But if you, I find now, if you actually start from room mics, and I don't know if it's particularly revolutionary, I'm sure lots of people do this, but if it always used to be the way that the kind of room mics were the last thing, and you stick them on and kind of compress them and smash them and distort them, and it's like, yeah, it's all happening. But if you actually start with those mics and get them great, fiddle around and move them, obviously moving things is obviously makes the biggest difference, more so than changing the mic. If you get those great and then start with your close mics, I've found generally that's much better.
Right.
Again,
so you sort of work backwards, you put the ambience up, then the overheads.
Yes, exactly. But then obviously you've got to kind of sort out what is your kind of phase centre, because obviously phase has a massive impact on sound. So once I kind of got all those, I'll then kind of start again with the kick, and then start bringing in those mics and then check phases from there. kind of thing. Doing this a lot. I don't actually do that when I'm.
That's because you work West Side.
Yeah, West Side, innit? So, it's like the mixer desk is up here, isn't it? So that's a recent thing. I tell you a really good trick. Again, I don't know if this is everyone does this. I pinched this off a friend of mine. If you get the right drummer and he's up for it and he'll do it, get them to overdub the snare after you've done the tracking and the editing and everything like that, and you just record the overheads and the rooms and maybe the close mic if you want it, but actually usually you don't need it. And if he just overdubs along to the track, obviously you don't get all the cymbal issues and stuff, and it's much better than firing off triggers, artificial triggers and stuff later. What you do need to have is an amazing assistant like Al, who's prepared to go into Pro Tools and chop it all up and move it.
Right.
So it's bang, because obviously it's got to be bang on, and even with the best one in the world, no drummer's going to be able to do that. Totally, or some might. But yeah, no, that's one I stole off a good friend of mine, and that's quite fun. Except the problem is when you mix really snare heavy, because you put that in.
Sounds great.
Yeah, and it's not like overheads or rooms where the more you do that, more cymbal and stuff.
Interesting.
So that's quite fun for people.
So how do you keep on top of things? If you're engineering a session, presumably you're doing 12 hours a day, slaving over a hot mixing desk, but you've also got to run the studio and deal with all the inquiries and things.
It can get pretty tough. It can get quite hairy. I mean, a lot of the times I'll have to get in quite early and do all the boring, email-y, paperworky type stuff. But Al, again, is great. He can take a phone call, he can take a booking, he knows most of our clients and stuff, so I'm quite happy, if I'm in the middle of it, for him to do that.
Right.
So yeah, it works. It works, but it's tough. But get away with it, just.
And well, congratulations on your MPG nomination.
Thank you very much.
So how did that come about? Did they just come out of the blue, or did you?
I just put enough money in the envelope. So
yeah.
That must have been it.
You'll come back to Tony Platt, I reckon.
Yeah, yeah. I honestly, I was as surprised as anyone, to be honest.
That's fantastic.
I'm really thrilled. I mean, I think I kind of got on their radar because I did the last Waterboys album. I did.
So how much of the album did you do?
I did sort of all the tracking.
All the recording.
They did a few
Great
sort of
record.
Oh, thank you. They did a few overdubby bits in production rooms around about.
Yeah.
But the lion's share of it, we tracked
It's a big sound, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot going on, and
it's great fun.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've made good use of all your ambient miking techniques and things.
Yes.
All those nice big drum sounds and things.
Yes. Well, the drummer was Ralph Salmons, and it's that age-old thing, isn't it? You get the right drummer with the right kit, and he makes us look good.
Yeah.
So
how did you get on with Mike Scott then? Is he as barking mad as he always was? Or?
Well, it was a really nice full circle thing for me because he used to come into West Side, and I used to be the T-boy, so I knew of him, and I knew how particular he can be. So it was pretty terrifying, but it all went kind of according to plan. He's a charming guy, and he just knows what he likes, and he knows what he wants. And when you've been doing it as long as he has, you don't put up with any shit from people, and So
was he producing, or was there another producer?
Oh God, yeah.
It was just him. So.
Well, actually, he was no. The bass player in the band was sort of co-producing it with him.
Right.
But I think ultimately, Mike Scott sort of has the final say. But I mean, so I think the MPG probably saw it, done that, and I think if you can get through engineering a Waterboys album, you can do anything, literally. But no, Mike Scott's charming and amazing. Amazing.
He does very powerful vocals as well. How do you record his vocals?
I can't take the credit for the vocals.
No, okay.
No, he does those himself.
Really?
He actually had terrible flu when he was in, so there was no thing of doing vocals at all.
So not even guide vocals? Or?
He did some guides, but they wouldn't. I can't remember now. Maybe some of the guides might have got used, but he's set up at home and he's got his laptop and so he can.
As everyone does these days.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he knows the sounds he likes, so he was able to get it. But no, that was a great fun record to do. And as you say, lots going on.
So was it recorded as a band setup, most of it, or did you do things?
Yes, pretty much as a band. Few bits of, we had the drums in the main room. The bass was actually down the corridor, tie line through. Mike Scott had his own booth.
So you had a bass amp set up?
Yes. Yeah. Mike Scott had his own booth, and then I think we had some other guitar-y amp type stuff in the other booth. So all the sort of space was spoken for. So I think the only thing we had to overdub was piano, because that was in the main room and we didn't want that on the drums.
Right.
So yeah, great fun though. Great fun.
I bet, yeah. Proper record.
Yeah, yeah. It's quite rare. I mean, it's amazing how rare it is these days that you get to do stuff live.
Yes.
You know, and that's always. I did a record, did a single with Ray Gelato recently, the swing guy.
Right.
And that was great fun. That was all live, and it was even all doors open.
Yes.
There was no separation at all.
Yeah.
A couple of mics on each thing, and it always, I don't know, it always sounds better to me. If you could do it, if the band can do it.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. But if the band can do it, there's something about all the sound in the room together, and you know, who cares about spill and all that kind of stuff? You just put it together.
Absolutely.
Off you go.
So what else have you been doing recently? What's it say?
Oh, I have to have a look.
On your Wonderland.
Wonderland, yes.
A girly group.
Yes, that was what's his socks, Louis Walsh. Yeah, I mean, I was just doing a bit of kind of helping out engineering on that. The producer's a chap called Elliot Jones, and he's kind of pretty hands-on. He does most of it, but I was kind of in the background. But he actually very kindly had me do some engineering for the Matt Cardle record, which has just come out.
So those records, are they all done in Pro Tools generally, or do people? Yeah.
Yeah. I think that Matt Cardle, we actually went to Fisher Lane. I think some of it had been tape and gone into tools, but that was before I came along.
Do you go to other studios and freelance then? You've been to?
I actually not really, not that much. I mean, I'd love to. I'm available to.
Well,
but
maybe you will after you won your award.
Well, one. Touch wood! Yeah. I'd like to do more, because I think it's that you don't ever want to get into a comfort zone, do you? And I know this place inside out, and I'm not saying I could do it with my eyes closed, because
but don't you think that makes it you work better because you know it inside out, you know what you're doing, and you're the expert, and
I
think
think
you get a better result than if you turned up at Abbey Road or somewhere you're not so familiar with. And
yeah. No, you're quite right. There's always that sort of getting to know a place thing, isn't it?
You've got all your favourite toys there, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. But I quite like the challenge of like when I went to Fisher Lane, I loved it. It was great fun to be on a different desk, be on an SSL. I haven't been on an SSL for ages, not since I was at Westside, and different room, and just working with different people, and that's the kind of fun of it in any job, really, isn't it? It's meeting new people and learning from people.
What made you choose the Audient for downstairs then? Was that something you'd seen one somewhere else?
Broke. No, not at all. That's not fair. I think at the sort of price point, what we figured was that I could sort of see a trend with, where are studios really going to keep their relevance? And I know that there are still some great mix rooms that justify their existence, but I kind of felt like if this thing was going to be anything, it should be about tracking.
Yes.
Because that's the point where you really need a good studio with a good room. So what we decided to invest more heavily in was the kind of front end mic amps, compressors, nice microphones and stuff like that.
Healthy looking rack, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. And so really the desk at that point was just going to be a very kind of clean monitor path to listen back through.
I see.
That had enough routing, that wasn't going to have noise issues, that wasn't going to have maintenance issues. And that desk is all of that, and it was amazingly well priced. And it's actually a great recording desk. I mean, we've got sort of racks of Neves and APIs and GMLs and stuff, but we've had a few Abbey Road engineers through over the years, and a lot of the times they use the Audient mic amps because they just like them. They're really good, clean mic amps in their own right. So the desk can kind of stand up even without the racks. But yeah, so it was that kind of combination of functionality and price, and just kind of blending in with the sort of meatier sounding stuff in the racks, and fitting into that whole picture.
Yeah.
But now that we got this, I think that's going to you know, kind of hopefully get a bit of a mix, bit more of a kind of mix thing happening outside mix work. You know, for people who want to do stems or an in the box mix but that's going through kind of funky old desk sound.
Perfect.
So that's kind of what we're thinking.
And you said people come and write in here presumably, and
that's the dream.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you write music at all these days?
Yes, I do. I've got a sort of library relationship with Universal Publishing, so I do some library tracks with them, which is great because when the studio's quiet, I can kind of crack on with that. And, you know.
How did that come about then? Was that something you did through somebody met at West Side, or?
No, there was a chap from Universal and he was just booking library sessions in here, and you know, I just collared him at the end of a session and said, "Have you got 5 minutes to have a listen to this? I, you know, write music." And thankfully he was into it, and he said, "Yeah, well, you know, do some tracks for me." So just been cracking on with that.
Yeah. So it seems the music business has plenty of money to spend on doing stuff still, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Despite all the.
Despite all the kind of doom and gloom, I think there's always a budget. I mean, certainly labels still understand from the studio end of things it needs to be a proper studio.
And are most of your bookings from labels, or are they from management people, or are they directly from artists?
Funny enough, when we started, it was about half and half privately funded and label, and more it's label, because I think with the way the world is at the moment, the privately funded stuff is really struggles. You know,
it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and the real barometer for it is weekends. When we first started, we were always working at weekends, and that was the private stuff. You know, the guys who had a job in the weekend and wanted to do their band. Yeah, proper job, as you say. And that's really struggling. That's really dropped off because people just don't have the kind of disposable income.
No,
you know, for X amount for a studio. I mean, obviously with those kind of things, we try and do them a bit more of a favour on the rate. But yeah, I've really noticed that's taken a knock. So yeah, it's more and more label stuff, really.
Do you ever do any development deals with them, with artists?
I've sort of had a go at a couple. The problem that I find is that I'll start one off because the studio might, you know, be a bit quiet, and then suddenly the studio gets manic again, and then it
has to go on the back burner.
It has to go on the back burner, and people, you know, rightly enough, people don't want to wait around. No. They want to be made to feel important. But I've got a band I'm sort of helping along at the moment of some young kids, which I'm quite excited about.
How do you find time to do all this stuff?
you just kind of, it's very ebb and flow. You know, you just kind of, you just make it work.
Yeah.
You know, somehow.
What sort of hours do people work in the studio these days? How do you book it? Do you do it on a daily lockout rate, or do you do?
It really depends. It depends on what they're trying. You know, when people call up, I always kind of have a nice chat with them and try and figure out exactly what they're hoping to achieve, and you know, obviously what their money is and all that kind of thing. And sometimes we'll do a lockout. It's that kind of balance between. I mean, a lot of the time, if I'm really into something, you know, I'll try and do my best to help with the money. But rather
than staying up all night finishing it off.
Yeah. It really just varies, and then of course you do the one where you agree to do a lockout, and 3 weeks into you're thinking, what the hell did I do? But you know, it really varies. But the hours are nothing like what they were when I started, and I'm sure when you were. I mean, it used to be always. It was 4 in the morning, wasn't it? And I guess again that's money. People can't really afford the overtime like they used to. Or people, I don't know what it is. It's quite rare now that we seem to go past midnight.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. Money.
Nice. People are a bit more sensible, I suppose, these days as well, aren't they?
Yeah, and also, actually, I know what it is. It's drugs. There's less drugs. I think there's less drugs because people don't want to arse about like they used to. They just can't afford to waste the time. So I think the kind of chemical assistance that might have kept people later is not around as much as it was, because studio time is so precious, isn't it? I mean, we get sessions where it's literally, I mean, you just don't get 5 minutes. It's just we did an album in 2 days last week. We did 14 songs in 2 days. It's just absurd.
Amazing,
but you know, people don't have the money to be able to afford more days. So what are you going to do? You've got to get it done.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
probably quite fun doing that. It's got a buzz, isn't it?
Yeah. To see if you can actually achieve it. Yeah.
Because it's kind of less pressure in some other ways, in that you're not sort of worrying about all the detail, and you're just getting on with it, aren't you, really?
Well, that one was quite fun because the guy, we weren't listening to anything, well, obviously we were listening to it going down, but we weren't reviewing takes. It was literally 4 takes of each song, band was set up live, 4 takes, go in there. We're not going to listen back, we're not going to have people coming back in and listening and going, oh, I'll fix this and fix that, because we'll have enough.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I was quite nervous about the guy when he got it home, whether it was all going to be there, but yeah, he called up and said, yeah, he's got to do a bit of scissors, but, you know, it was all essentially there.
Right.
But yeah, no, I quite like the kind of pacier stuff.
Yeah.
It gets a bit boring when you're kind of
Absolutely.
sitting around with your feet up.